NHL Mock Draft right now, and it's going to be an interesting NHL draft in 2019 because there's two players in the running to go first overall. Jack Hughes from USA and Kaapo Kakko from Finland. It feels like 2016 all over again when we had Austin Matthews and Patrick Laine. And I think Jack Hughes is going to be the number one pick. He's been the number one prospect all year. He's been the number one prospect heading into last season. Yeah, people were talking about Jack Hughes in February of 2018. That's how much hype this kid's gotten. People were crowning him the number one pick as early as February of 2018, while he's still playing hockey on Team USA. And he's maintained that momentum for an entire year and a half, which says a lot.
Yeah, people do that.
That's what separates the great players, the special players, from the great players. The special players not only get that momentum, that they maintain it. Sidney Crosby was the number one pick after his rookie season with Rimouski. Like, he was just that good. Like, he was crowned the number one pick that year. And
he's lived up to it.
Yeah, he's lived up to it. I'm not saying Jack Hughes is Sidney Crosby. Far from it.
But I will say this. I think when the Penguins also didn't have Gary Malkin, I don't know if, to take some of the pressure off of Crosby, I don't know if Crosby would have been as good as he is. Because with Penguins also having Gary Malkin, you pretty much have a 1A and a 1B center combination.
They do. They have the best center combination in the NHL. The Penguins have that. But you look at the guys who've been hyped up as the number one pick and have maintained their momentum. Crosby's not the only player who did this. Aaron Ekblad did this.
You got Shaq Eichel.
Connor McDavid was hyped up as the number one pick, and he's lived up to the hype. Jack Eichel as well. Eichel would have been number one in any other draft class. But Connor McDavid was considered the guy in that class. And, yeah, Nolan, I'm not going to give Nico Hischier the benefit of the doubt because Nolan Patrick was initially projected to go first overall. But as the combine unfolded for that year, Nico Hischier gave more positive body language cues during the interview process. And at that split second, I knew the Devils were taking Nico first based on intuition. And the Devils got another steal in the 2018 NHL draft when they took top 10 prospect Ty Smith, 17th overall, to boost their blue line. Ty Smith was the number 10 player on my board. He was a defender, and the Devils took him from the Spokane Chiefs. This year, the Devils have New Jersey has to choose between Jack Hughes and Kaapo Kakko with the first pick after winning the lottery with the league's third worst record, with only Ottawa and the Kings doing worse this past season. And he's the best prospect from USA since Matthews. This draft does remind me, but I think New Jersey takes the younger brother of Quinn Hughes first overall. 5'10", 170. New Jersey will not shut up about how Hughes has better skill and speed on the ice as a skater than any prospect this decade. That is a tidbit I heard from the Devils. Sources close to the Devils have told me that this guy has the best speed and skating on the ice of any prospect this decade. Faster than McDavid, faster than Austin Matthews. The only center New Jersey had graded higher than Jack Hughes from a speed standpoint, dating back to 1995, was center Joe Thornton, who was selected first overall in 1997 by the Boston Bruins. So they've only had one center graded higher than Jack Hughes in the past 24 years to be exact. But that says a lot. I mean, I know Joey doesn't follow hockey as extensively as Kerm or myself, but that actually does say a lot about how highly the Devils think of Jack Hughes. And this is a guy who had 54 points as a rookie on the USHL level, and then he had 48 points this year. He did well enough to be team captain of the USA under-17 and the under-18 team, despite declining in the USHL in terms of production this season. He's got the speed, skating, agility, playmaking, vision, stick handling, puck control, offensive awareness, defense awareness, and the hockey IQ. He grades higher in these categories than any of the draft pick. The lack of size in his frame and the shot selection are the areas he needs to improve in. Wrist shot power, wrist shot accuracy, slap shot power, slap shot accuracy. These are all areas Jack Hughes needs to improve in. He needs to improve his shot and maybe add more muscle. He has a higher ceiling than Nico Hischier or Travis Zajac due to the fact that he's someone who projects as a player that will obtain 100-plus points down the road once he develops his shot. And he's capable of moving Hischier down to line 2, your number 1 pick from 2 years ago. Travis Zajac would move down to the 3rd line, and that would also put Pavel Zacha, their 2015 first-round pick, on the 4th line. And that would give the New Jersey Devils incredible depth at the center position. But I think the biggest reason the Devils struggled last year is because their line 1 left winger and team captain, Taylor Hall, number 1 pick in 2010 NHL draft, missed last season due to an injury. Once Taylor Hall got injured after those 33 games and missed the rest of the season, New Jersey's season was over at that point because they didn't have a line 2 left winger that could step up, and had to be Nico Hischier and Kyle Palmieri carrying that first line. You also had Zajac on the 2nd line. Sometimes you had to move Zajac up to the 1st line. So I think Ty Smith's also going to push for a roster spot either on the 2nd or 3rd line because the Devils have Damone Severson, Andy Green. They do have some good players. But they're going to have a healthy Taylor Hall. They're going to have Jack Hughes. They're going to have Mackenzie Blackwood finally made the NHL as a backup goalie. I raved about Mackenzie Blackwood. I think the first year Kerm and Joey were on the podcast when they covered the 2015 NHL draft. So Mackenzie Blackwood's finally in the NHL. Their 2nd-round goalie that they drafted to succeed Corey Schneider. I think New Jersey's going to be ready for a playoff push if they're healthy. And if they miss the playoffs, they should be picking in the 11 to 15 range, assuming everyone's healthy, because this is a team that's capable of contending. And if you give them another number 1 draft pick, they're going to have more offensive depth. They've drafted well the last few years. And it just feels like this team is putting things together and heading in the right direction. So I know they're in a very tough division with the Capitals, with the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Philadelphia Flyers, who've gotten better at some point. Well, the Flyers missed the playoffs, but I mean, they're in a really competitive division. I mean, there really isn't anything else to say. I mean, the Metropolitan Division did get out. The Atlantic Division did do better than Metropolitan, considering that Boston made the Stanley Cup. But Columbus is in that Metropolitan Division. Carolina, I think, is in that division. I mean, the Metropolitan's a competitive division, a very competitive division, and the Devils.
Oh, it has been ever since they went to this division alignment.
They've been struggling, but they finally got a playoff spot last season before this season, and now it feels like the Devils are going to be back, assuming Taylor Hall's healthy. But Taylor Hall being healthy is the big thing, because anytime you lose your team captain to an injury, the morality of your team plummets. Joey will tell you that from personal experience, even though he's not as avid of a hockey fan as Kerr or myself. Anytime you lose your team captain to a season-ending injury, the morality in your team and the motivation, the drive for that team to perform is going to plummet. That's just
not always. I will give you an example. Us for having my local SPHL team, we've all started captains midway through the season, but the morale improved because our captain was the Make-A-Wish kid who had been battling cancer for a couple of years and was finally cancer-free. So the morale improved this year.
Well, everybody wanted to play for the captain in that situation.
Yeah.
So I'd argue that had a different outcome because it motivated the team. It brought the team together. Like, if someone has cancer, that's going to unite people to play for that teammate.
And he was the official captain. There was nothing artificial about it. The team had three. He had on his shirt. It was okay. He was introduced with the team during his cancer battle, and during that time, the team had three assistant captains instead of one captain and two assistant captains.
All right, as a hockey fan, if you were the coach of the Devils, where would you put Jack Hughes? Because I think he's going to be the first pick, but I don't know if they're going to put him on the first line right away like they did with Nico Hischier, or do they want to ease him into that role? Because he's got everything down except the shot. You could put him on the second line or the third line. I don't think he'll go to the fourth line because if you draft a guy number 1 overall, you're not putting him on the fourth line. But his shot needs to improve. I don't think I'd put a guy whose shot needs to improve on the top line right away. So if you were the Devils coach, where would you put Jack Hughes before we get to the next pick?
For the first couple of weeks, so I would put him on the second line.
Because he's got that speed, that game-changing speed that you just cannot teach. So second line, that's a good spot to put him. He'll face weaker defenders, and he'll be able to ease into the lineup.
Yeah, I would put him on the second line because second line gets maybe a minute less of ice time than the first liners get. So I would put him on second line for the first couple of months, get used to the game, the speed of the NHL players. And if he does good then I would move him up to the first line.
Yeah, and Taylor Hall and Kyle Palmieri are going to be there to help Nico Hischier or whoever's on the first line, whether it's Zajac or Hischier. The second line will be all up to Austin Matthews. He'll have that line all to himself. He'll coordinate the wingers. He'll communicate with the wingers, and the wingers will respond to him. So the second line should improve with just his presence alone. So, yeah, maybe not right away, but in time, that second line will be more productive as a result. And then the New York Rangers have the number 2 pick in this draft, and I've gave them Kaapo Kakko. He had 22 goals, 16 assists, and 38 points in 45 games. I think Kakko's a better shooter at this point because he actually has a good shot, but Hughes is the better passer and long-term player. But both prospects are top 2 talents in this class, and both can play on the first line down the road. You could play Kaapo Kakko in the first line next season, and you could make him your Rick Nash, your dynamic right winger, and he's 6'2", 190. There are people that think Kakko's more ready, but Hughes is higher ceiling. So, but both players are going to be game changers, and I think. And their other right winger they took 9th overall, Vitaly Kravtsov, who I mocked the Rangers at 28. He's also going to be on the Rangers next season. So the Rangers are going to have more right wing talent. And Mika Zibanejad had 30 goals, 34 assists, and 44 assists and 74 points. He had a career season last year. Mika Zibanejad just came out of nowhere and dominated for the Rangers, and everybody else in the Rangers just kind of sucked outside of goalie Henrik Lundqvist. So, I mean, Lundqvist cannot carry this team forever, and you're starting to see the Rangers enter that rebuild. And they just got to get those pieces before Lundqvist peaks. And it's going to be really interesting to see if Kaapo Kakko can start leading that turnaround for the New York Rangers. All right, number 3 overall, Chicago Blackhawks. I'm going with Alex Turcotte, and Turcotte is number 5 on my board. I have him at 5 on my board. I know a lot of big boards say he's the 3rd best player, but I don't think Chicago's going to go with the best player on the board at 3. They should take Bowen Byram. He's my 3rd best player. I think he's a clear-cut 3rd best player in this draft, but I've heard rumors that Chicago wants a center at 3. They drafted 2 defensemen in the first round last year, and they got Adam Boqvist and Henry Jokiharju. They also got another defenseman in their system, so I believe they're going to take a center at 3 because they really don't have any depth behind Jonathan Taves and Dylan Strome, who they got from a trade with the Coyotes. And they really need that 3rd-line center. They really need another guy for depth. And Alex Turcotte's a guy that is going to go to college for a year, and then he's going to make the jump to the NHL. But whenever Jack Hughes was on USHL and Turcotte was on the USA Under-18 team, Turcotte would play on the first line. Turcotte also played on the first line of Team USA whenever Jack Hughes was not on the USHL lineup. Like, he was that good of a prospect that he was getting first-line action despite being on the same team as Jack Hughes. And despite what his stats say, he can do a lot on tape. He's bigger than Jack Hughes, 5'11", 185. I mean, 8 goals, 24 assists, 32 points in his first USHL season. He only played 16 games compared to his 31 USHL games last year, but he had 10 more points. Turcotte's a guy who's got line 1 ability, and he's got the upside to be a line 1 guy, but in a situation like the Chicago Blackhawks, you have a guy who's won 3 Stanley Cups in Jonathan Taves, who can mentor you. You've also got Dylan Strome. This guy can just ease into that 3rd line role, and the pressure will not be on him. And eventually Turcotte will be pushing Dylan Strome for 2nd line ice time. if Strome does not have a good season this year. And I think that competition is healthy and it's good for the Blackhawks. Plus, it gives Boqvist and Joki Harju another year to develop, and then next season, not this year, but the next year after that, the Blackhawks will be ready to contend once they get Turcotte and once they get. Also, the Blackhawks did trade for Olli Maatta yesterday. Pittsburgh Penguins defenseman Olli Maatta got traded to the Chicago Blackhawks yesterday. So, just wanted to bring that up.
And it also helps with somewhat with the Penguins salary cap. That was a big reason why he was traded, because Penguins are having salary cap issues again.
So they didn't want to trade him; they just traded him for salary cap reasons.
And also, he started good, but he hasn't developed like the team wanted him to, because he was still slow. And he was your old school defenseman, prone to getting beat by a faster player, and more of a stay-at-home defenseman. And when there was a lot of times where he would get beat, leave his goalie out to dry. You see that with every game.
Yep, and the Colorado Avalanche at number 4, they select Bowen Byram out of Vancouver. And Colorado has done a fantastic job under director of scouting Alan Heppel. Heppel was not the director of scouting until 2015, but he advised the Avalanche front office to draft Gabriel Landeskog at number 2 overall over Adam Larson, which some people questioned at the time, but that pick has panned out for the Avalanche. He also took Nate McKinnon first overall in a year where McKinnon was being pushed by Seth Jones to be the number 1 selection. That pick has also panned out. Since he took over as director of scouting in 2015, Mikko Rantanen, 10th overall on the Avalanche. Tyson Jost, 10th overall, also on the Avalanche. 2016 first-round pick. 2017 first-round pick, Cale Makar, 4th overall, now on the Avalanche. I mean, he's done a fantastic job with this team, and you got to give him credit because Colorado, they get Bowen Byram in this mock, and Byram's a guy Weppel is raved about, and he's only 6'0", 184 pounds, but he completes Colorado's blue line, and he's the top defender in this draft by leaps and bounds, and it's not a good defensive class. And scouts should not be hard on this defensive class because there were 14 defensemen drafted in the first round of last year's NHL draft, which was stacked with blue line talent, by the way. So, I mean, Bowen Byram, though, this is a guy that had 27 points in 60 games as a rookie. And this year, he just took off. He had 26 goals, 45 assists, 71 points, and plus 33 plus-minus ratio in 67 WHL games. He also had 8 goals, 18 assists, and 26 points in the 22 WHL playoff games, getting the Vancouver Giants to Game 7 of the 2019 WHL Finals, where the Prince Albert Raiders defeated Vancouver in overtime to win the WHL. So, I mean, Byram basically carried his team as a line 1 defenseman, the age of 18, to the championship game in the WHL, Game 7. He didn't win, but he's good enough to make that jump to the NHL right now, and he's probably the only defender in this entire draft class that can make the leap right now. And you've got Eric Johnson, Tyson Barrie, Ian Cole, Mark Barbero, Cale Makar, and Samuel Girard, a 2015-2016 second-round pick that I loved coming out of Sherbrooke. And Colorado can cut Barbero to save money. Barbero only played in 12 games, only played in 9 playoff games, only had 1 point in the entire season, and they're paying him $1 million. Whereas Bowen Byram is going to make under $1 million. You can put him on your team right away, and you can save more money. You can save like $200,000 in cap space just by replacing Barbero with Bowen Byram. And then you have Byram, Cale Makar, and Girard competing for that ice time next to Ian Cole on the second line. Now you have 3 really good defensive pairings. And I think with this move, with Bowen Byram, if you draft him at 4, the Avalanche come out of the Western Conference as a team to challenge the Blues and the Sharks, because the Avalanche were healthy this year, and everything went worked out for them, and they were actually able to push the San Jose Sharks to Game 7. So I think with Bowen Byram on their team, that changes their outlook, and it puts them in a position where they're in position to challenge the Sharks and the Blues for the Western Conference next season, because if you get the best defender in the draft and you're already pretty strong in most areas, that changes the outlook for your team as well as the dynamic. So I think Colorado is going to be one of these teams that's on the rise next year. Any thoughts? No, we'll go to the Kings at 5. We're going Dylan Cousins to the LA Kings, number 4 player on my board at number 5. And I think Dylan Cousins is versatile enough to play anywhere at forward, left wing, center, right wing, 6'3", 182. Had 53 points as a rookie, 22 goals, 31 assists. He also had 7 goals, 6 assists, and 13 points in a WHL playoff run. This year, Cousins had 34 goals, 50 assists, 84 points in 68 regular season games. And he's the best player on the board for the Kings because it's either him or Vasily Podkolzin, and Cousins is more durable than Podkolzin. And that's my argument for Dylan Cousins. Plus, Cousins, you want someone that can help you right now. In 2019, 2020, you should take Cousins. If you want someone more upside, maybe you should take Podkolzin. And the Kings could easily take Podkolzin at 5, but I'll get to the Podkolzin pick for the Red Wings at 6 here, because Podkolzin's a guy that he was number 3 on my board before his injury status and durability concerns popped up. He didn't work out at the NHL Combine, but he checks out all the boxes on tape. He knows how to drive to the net. The offensive awareness, the stick handling is there. He's a pretty complete skater, and you like to see him improve defensively, but he's a pretty complete skater, and he knows how to shoot the puck. And Podkolzin was 3rd on my board at one point, behind Hughes and Kakko. He was 3rd on my big board at one point before the NHL Combine. So that should say a lot about Podkolzin, his dedication, his work ethic. And the Red Wings get him here as the Steve Yzerman era is underway in Detroit. Yes, the Red Wings general manager from 1995 to 2009, he's now in the Edmonton Oilers. I can't remember his name, but the Oilers got the former Red Wings GM, and Yzerman's now the new Red Wings GM. So the Red Wings kept their GM for nearly 25 years, and now they're bringing Yzerman back as the GM. I don't know if it's a publicity stunt, but Yzerman did well with Tampa Bay. I mean, he didn't get Tampa Bay Lightning the Stanley Cup, but he did well with the team, and they got rid of him. He resigned. I think the team wanted him out because they weren't making that push. He resigns, and the team does even worse without him. So they lose to Columbus in the first round without him. So, I mean, Yzerman can turn the Red Wings around. They've had some good drafts the last few years, but the players they drafted haven't taken that next step yet. Michael Rasmussen, the 2 guys they got, they had a very good 2018 NHL draft. So, I mean, Yzerman could right the ship here. Yes, they need defense, they need blue line help, but Podkolzin's the best player on the board, and I just don't think there's a defender worth taking at 6 if Bowen Byram's gone. So I would take Podkolzin here. We'll go to Buffalo at 7 now. Kirby Dach. This is a guy that is one of the more complete players in this class. 25 goals, 48 assists, 73 points. Victor Olofsson is their line 1 left winger. He's going to be called up. Jack Eichel's the line 1 center, and Sam Reinhart, former center turned right winger, is the line 1 right winger. You got Jeff Skinner and Kyle Okposo on that second line, but they need a center with the skill set that Kirby Dach has, which allows Evan Rodriguez to move down to the 3rd line and Casey Middlestat to move down to the 4th line. Casey Middlestat was a good player. He would be on the 2nd line next to Eichel. He's not. He lost that job to Evan Rodriguez. So Casey Middlestat, while he's good, he's a back 6 player in the NHL. He's a good back 6 player, but he's not a front 6 player. And you need that second center to complement Eichel if the Buffalo Sabres ever want to become anything. And Kirby Dach is a guy who has a shot of becoming that player. He's one of these players, probably the last player in this top 7. I think Kerm would agree with me that after this portion of the draft, after the first 7 picks, this is probably where the guys who aren't NHL ready, who have high upside, get picked, or the guys who are capable of making the jump to the NHL but have chosen to go to college for a year, this is where those guys come off the board after this pick with Kirby Dach at number 7, because after this pick, this is probably the last player who has a shot of getting called up to the NHL this year in 2019, 2020. But the draft's not about what your team can do this year. It's about finding the best player down the road long term for your team whenever they arrive. Anything you'd like to add to that? All right, so that's the top 7, and this is where the drop-off in the parity begins to take place. Edmonton at 8. I'm going Philip Broberg out of AIK. This is the guy that I'm giving them Broberg because this is the guy not named Bowen Byram that's considered the best defender in the class. And you've got Evan Bouchard in your prospects pool. He's going to get called up. Oscar Klefbom and Adam Larson occupy that first line. Chris Russell and Darnell Nurse are on the second line. Now you get Broberg for insurance as someone who could put on the third line. He may go play in Sweden's league for another year, but he's someone who can make an immediate impact like Adam Larson, but he's also someone with the ceiling of a top 4 defenseman rather than a guy with the ceiling of the line 1 defenseman like Larson had. And even though Larson reached that ceiling, once he peaked, he never really ascended into that elite line 1 center that people thought he'd be. He reached his ceiling as a line 1 center, and he's been solid, but he hasn't been spectacular. But Edmonton gets another defender here. They get Broberg at 8. The Anaheim Ducks get Trevor Zegras at 9. They get depth behind Ryan Getzlav. Zegras has elite offensive ability. He can play anywhere at forward. 14 goals, 26 assists, 40 points. He's also committed to Boston University, so he can develop for a year. The Ducks do not have to play him right away. And then the Vancouver Canucks. We go with a BCHL player at number 10. They get a local from the British Columbia Hockey League. Vancouver is located in the province of British Columbia, for anyone who does not know about provinces. That's a Canadian geography lesson. Alex Newhook had 22 goals, 44 assists, and 66 points as a rookie. He did so well, he got promoted to team captain after his rookie year. And he had a much weaker supporting cast than Tyson Yost, who had 104 points in his draft year. That didn't matter. He got 102 points this year. Team captain of the Grizzlies led the BCHL in points. He plays like Jack Hughes, Connor McDavid, and Nate McKinnon on tape. When you watch him showcase his explosion and his burst on tape, I'm not sure he has the upside those guys have, but when you look at him skate, when you look at him from a speed standpoint, he glides really fast on the ice. He showcases that explosion, and from a standpoint, the skating, the foot speed, the playmaking, passing, wrist shot power, wrist shot accuracy, slap shot power, slap shot accuracy, vision, awareness on both ends, hockey IQ. He checks all the boxes. Hey, Kerm, what's up?
He might end up going to a U.S. college since he was in the British Columbia Hockey League. That's the Junior 8 league. So he still has college. If he wants to go to a U.S. college, he can.
He is going to a U.S. college. He's going to Boston College for a year, and then he's probably going to make the jump to the NHL in 2020 or 2021.
Yeah, because if you play in one of the provincial leagues in Canada, which is usually your Junior 8 leagues, which there's 13 of them, one for each of the provinces, you still have NCAA eligibility. It's only if you play in the Western Hockey League, Ontario Hockey League, or the Quebec-based Junior League, you lose your NCAA eligibility.
Well, because he played in the BCHL, he's still NCAA eligible.
Because they don't get any money.
Yeah. But Newhook's a guy who should get paid, but he's gonna have to wait for that paycheck. But he's gonna be a very good player once he arrives in the NHL. Philadelphia Flyers. But thoughts on this top 10 so far? I think it's done pretty well. Philadelphia Flyers, they get Peyton Krebs, and the Flyers got Matt Niskanen, former Penguins defenseman Matt Niskanen. Now they get Peyton Krebs, a guy who I had a top 6 grade on before he tore his Achilles. This guy took Kootenay Ice, which was one of the worst teams in the NHL, and he had 68 points. He was a team captain before tearing his Achilles. Teams are worried about his durability concerns, along with his defense having the ability to be good but needing work due to how inconsistent he is on defense. Teams are worried about that. So that's why Peyton Krebs has slipped out of the top 10, but I think the Flyers at 11 would take him because you have Claude Giroux, Sean Couturier, and Nolan Patrick. But you don't have a fourth-line center. And Peyton Krebs is a guy who could contribute as that fourth-line center. He could push for that fourth-line job right away as a rookie, or they could return him to Kootenay, where he develop and improve his defense. I'm guessing he'd probably return to Kootenay, but he's a guy people would talk about in Flyers training camp. Like, he'd bring that excitement in. He'd bring that wow factor. Because, I mean, the Flyers are closer than people think. Okay, they've drafted really well the last few years. They got defensive players to shore up the blue line. They've had good continuity at center. They got Carter Hart to be their goalie of the future, which I was really high on the Carter Hart pick back in the 2016 NHL draft. He was my top-ranked goalie in that draft, and the Flyers were able to get him in the second round. So for me, the Flyers are a team that they are closer than people think, just like the Devils. I don't know if they're ready to contend like the Penguins or Stanley Cup, but they are closer than people think. I mean, the Flyers are another one of these teams that could make a move next season in a very competitive division. Minnesota Wild at 12, Ryan Suzuki, Barrie Colts, OHL. And Ryan Suzuki is not a fast player, but he's a very good player that checks all the boxes on tape. Stick handling, passing, wrist shot power. As far as a shooter, a decision maker, agility, the vision, offensive awareness, defensive awareness, hockey IQ. He also knows how to avoid contact despite not having the fastest foot speed, despite not having that burst. And he has good speed, but not great speed like his brother Nick Suzuki. And I think the reason NHL scouts are lower on Ryan Suzuki than myself, because Ryan Suzuki is a guy who's 6'1", 181. He was the line one center on the Barrie Colts right away as a rookie. Like, he won the job. He outplayed the other centers and won the line one job right away as a rookie when they had Andrei Svechnikov last year. And he had another strong season without Svechnikov. He also got promoted to alternate captain. So 25 goals, 50 assists, 70 points in 65 games. Following the departure of Svechnikov, he only had 30 assists and 44 points in his rookie year on that top line. But as far as production and consistency goes, Ryan Suzuki checks all the boxes. But I think scouts are putting a lot of stock into speed and that explosive burst because they want fast guys that can go down the ice, as well as guys with stamina who can maintain that intensity for an entire 60 minutes. And because Suzuki doesn't necessarily have the best speed, scouts just think his ceiling is limited. And that's a valid argument that scouts can make. But I think Ryan Suzuki is one of these players that you put him in the right role or the right situation, a team like the Minnesota Wild that's already stacked at center, you put him in a role where he can be a situational player on the back six, he could contribute right away. Or they can return him to Barrie and see if he'll win the captaincy job or improve his speed or improve his explosiveness. But either way, Ryan Suzuki is a great future pick for the Minnesota Wild at number 12, in my opinion, because he checks out all those boxes. Number 13, the Florida Panthers. I'm going Matthew Robertson for the Edmonton Oil Kings. He's 6'4", 201, 7 goals, 17 assists, 24 points as a rookie. He had 26 assists this year, but he's my top defenseman on the board, top player on the board as well. I mean, they could go goalie Spencer Knight here, but I don't think the Panthers are going to take a goalie that early, but they could take Spencer Knight if they're that confident in him. But this is probably where you see the drop-off in talent. Raphael Lavoie, center, Halifax Mooseheads. Lavoie was on the second line for Halifax. This is probably where the drop-off begins to start because Lavoie did well during the Memorial Cup, and he can play all three spots. He had 73 points this year, but he was a line two guy. He was not a first-line player. He was a line two center. but he's good enough to develop for the future. And the Coyotes have Clayton Keller. They've got that core. They've got a good core of players. John Shaika has done a good job since taking over as the GM for this team, putting the pieces together slowly and putting something together. And the Montreal Canadiens at 15, I gave the Canadiens Arthur Kaliev to wrap up the top 15 because Kaliev is a guy who's 6'2", 190, is the wrist shot power, wrist shot accuracy, slap shot power, slap shot accuracy. He's a natural goal scorer despite playing on the second or third line before breaking out this past season. I mean, he was able to get 51 goals, 51 assists, and 102 points on the second line. He was a third-line player as a rookie. He moves up to the second line this year, and it's like he had this much production. Why didn't you put him on the first line? That's someone who could be the replacement for Max Pacioretty. You give him another year to develop in the OHL. He shows you this kind of production, 102 points on a top line. Then, yeah, promote him to the NHL. But he's a guy you can develop for another year. And I think this is a pretty good top 15 so far. I'm going to try to get through 16 through 31. And then maybe we'll do the Father's Day mock, depending on whether Joey's in the call. If not, we'll just call it a show because we got a lot of things to cover. Cole Caulfield for the Avalanche. 5'7", 163, 23 goals, 10 assists, 33 points. Caulfield had 41 points this past season. He lacked size, but the slap shot accuracy, like the accuracy and the shooting power is there. And Cole Caulfield's going to Wisconsin with USHL teammate Alex Turcotte, who I mocked to Chicago at 3. So they get the best player on the board. The Vegas Golden Knights, Moritz Selder, Adler Mannheim, 6'4", 2'7". The vision, the offense awareness, defense awareness, and hockey IQ. The German player goes to Vegas. So yes, I'm mocking it. I'm mocking the German defenseman in this draft, Morris Seider, to the Vegas Golden Knights. For number 18, the Dallas Stars, Matthew Boldy. Boldy has potential to be a line one left winger, but he's going to Boston College where he's going to play with Alex Turcotte. And he's not going to be NHL ready right away. Dallas drafts him at 18 because Boldy's the best player on the board. He's got the size, hands, stick handling, passing, slap shot and wrist shot power, offensive awareness, defense awareness, hockey IQ. You want to see him get faster, showcase more explosion, but he's a great skater who checks off most of, if not all, the boxes. He had 35 points as a rookie, 43 points this year. He's also an alternate captain behind Jack Hughes. Some experts actually have a top 10 grade on Boldy, so if he makes it to Dallas here, the Stars are going to pull the trigger because Dallas may have a setback season, but by the time – because Dallas was not supposed to get past Nashville. They were not even supposed to get – and then once they played the Blues, I was thinking, oh, the Blues, they're not going to win the Stanley Cup, and they surprised me. The Blues actually beat Dallas in double overtime. They earned their Stanley Cup. They went through hell to get it, and all the guys Dallas has drafted, Riley Tuft, he's on Texas now. Jake Ottinger, 3 years at Boston University. Now he'll be the starting AHL goalie until Khudobin. And when Khudobin's contract expires, the Stars can promote him in the NHL, but I'm guessing they'll get a short-term goalie and they'll keep him in the AHL for another 3 years while he develops that part of his game, and then they'll bring him up when he's 24 because Jordan Binnington was 25 when the Blues brought him up. Jake Ottinger's 21. But if you keep him in the AHL for all 3 years of his rookie deal, then he asks for a one-way contract after doing well in the AHL, then you can actually bring him up if he's good. Now, if one of your goalies gets injured this year, you have to keep Ottinger in the AHL. But next year, you could bring him up. If you like what he does in the AHL and he just wows the pants off you and leads Texas to another Calder Cup finals, then you could bring him up. You could entertain the idea of bringing him up. You also got Ty Dellandrea, their 2018 first-round pick, returning to the Flint Firebirds, and Boldy would be in Boston College. So you'd have all these guys ready for 2020. And next season would just be Dallas makes the playoffs, but they don't get past the first round. It'd be a minor speed bump, but you'd have a lot of long-term pieces in place, and Jim Nill has agreed to a one-year extension. So I'm really interested to see what Nill's going to do. He handled the Miro Heiskanen pick, saved his job. I did not expect Miro Heiskanen to just come in and have the impact he did, but he was good, and I'll give Neil credit for drafting him. The Ottawa Senators at 19, Victor Soderstrom, Brynäs IF. He played with Adam Boqvist in Brynäs. The two-way defenseman checks all the boxes on tape, despite what the stats say, and his competitive instincts make him a game changer. Ottawa's going to be hoping he's the next Erik Karlsson. Number 20, Philip Tomasino, Niagara. The Rangers need a line 2 center. Tomasino is a line 2 center. He's the best center on the board. He was line 2 center behind Akil Thomas, who was a first-round pick by the LA Kings in last year's draft. Akil Thomas had 102 points on the top line. Tomasino had 72 points on the second line. And since Akil Thomas is coming back to Niagara for another year to develop, I'm guessing Tomasino is going to do the same, and Niagara is going to be one of these teams to look out for in the OHL next season with 2 first-round picks at center anchoring their top 2 lines. I think Niagara is a team that could potentially make a push for the Memorial Cup. That's an early prediction for 2020. Pittsburgh Penguins, Thomas Harley. I mean, this is a guy that he had 47 assists and 58 points this year, 15 points to rookie. He struggles defensively, though. He's 6'3", 192, but he's a bigger version of Ryan Merkley. Ryan Merkley was complete offensively, but atrocious defensively. And Thomas Harley is terrible defensively, but he's got a much better attitude. And Ryan Merkley had a bad attitude. There were questions about his attitude, and he's already been traded to another OHL team after the Sharks took him at 21. And Thomas Harley is a better version of Merkley without the attitude. And the Penguins, they've said it. They want players with attitude. They do not care about how most scouts rank draft boards based on talent. They put stock into players with the right attitude. So if the Penguins draft somebody at 21, they better bring the right attitude. They better to the team. That's what they basically put their stock into. How does this guy behave? How is his attitude? How is his body language? They want someone with the attitude. I mean, you can say all you want about having the right attitude, but you have to actually own it on tape and have the attitude if you're going to make it in this league. And with Olli Maatta getting traded, they need blue line help even more. They might have to go all defense this draft and hope to hit on another prospect outside of their first-round player. LA Kings at 22, I'm going Spencer Knight, 6'3", 198. He's the most touted goalie to enter the draft from the USA since Jack Campbell. He's got a higher ceiling than Jake Ottinger, who Dallas drafted. And I've seen this guy mocked as high as 13th to Florida. One team that really likes Spencer Knight is the Kings. It would make sense for him to be the successor to Jonathan Quick because Jonathan Quick's 33 years old. Knight had a .902 save percentage in 18 games as a rookie, but he had a .318 GAA. He had a .903 save percentage in 16 USHL games. Knight going to Boston College. The Kings can groom Knight to be their goalie of the future. So Boston College has Alex Newhook, Matthew Boldy, and Spencer Knight. So Boston College really loading up with these recruits, getting good players. Islanders, Ville Heinola. They got Noah Dobson and Bo Wild, 2 first-round prospects to be the future Islanders blue line players. Now you get Heinola, another player for depth, and he had a 2 goals, 12 assists, 14 points, and a +7 ± ratio this year. So he complements the current core of defenders. Nashville, Brett Lezon, Prince Albert Raiders. The Tri-City Americans drafted Lezon, but he blossomed once he got traded to Prince Albert, and he had 89 points in his first full season with Prince Albert. And I think Brett Lezon at 24 is a good pick. 25, the Washington Capitals. We're going to give them Nolan Foote. The younger brother of Kalon Foote is versatile enough to play left wing, right wing, or defense. And he defends like his brother despite being a little winger. And he's not as big as his 6'4" brother, who's already bulked up to 220, gaining 20, 30 pounds of muscle since the Lightning took him. I think Nolan Foote's the best player on Kelowna, though. Despite what other scouting services say, I think Nolan Foote's the best player on the Kelowna Rockets in this draft. But there are some people that like is the 2 players on the blue line better. So while we agree to disagree, I think Nolan Foote's a good pick for the Capitals. Calgary 26, Nils Hoglander of Rogel BK. He's 5'9", 185, 7 goals, 7 assists, 14 points on Rögle BK's main roster in Sweden. He also wowed scouts at the NHL Combine in both the testing drills and the interview process. This was a guy who was considered a second-round pick, but he's generated late first-round buzz, and one team that was really wowed by Höglander at the Combine was Calgary. So Calgary gets Höglander here at 26. 27, Tampa Bay Lightning, Jacob Pelletier. He can play all three spots at forward. He has the speed, the explosion, the hockey IQ, pretty much checks out all the boxes. He's more versatile than some of the other faster skaters in this class, despite being under 5'10" at 5'9", 161. You can take him and groom him for the future. If Pelletier was taller and bigger, you could argue he's a top 15 selection based on his production. 39 goals, 50 assists, 89 points. Lightning get him in the late first round here. Carolina Hurricanes, Sasha Mutala. This is a guy who could go anywhere between rounds 2 and 5, but I love his tape so much that I think Sasha Mutala is a first-round pick. He only had 41 points, which is a bit underwhelming, but he defends well. He has the vision. He checks out a lot of things that I look for on tape. 29, the Anaheim Ducks. Cam York, 5'11", 173. He had 33 points. He's considered a top 20 pick on most boards. The Anaheim gets a steal at 29. And now we get to the final two picks, Boston and Buffalo. Now we get to Connor McMichael from the London Knights. This is a guy that wasn't even my top prospect for the London Knights heading into the season, but he's a guy who's emerged as their leader. 36 goals, 36 assists, 72 points this season in his draft season. NHL teams are projecting him as a line 3 or line 4 center. And since Boston has two good centers with Krejci and Bergeron, they do not have to worry about McMichael being anything more than a third or fourth line center. So Boston can get him for value and groom him to be that third or fourth line center. And then that leaves us with the final player on my board, Vladislav Kolyachuk. This is a guy that I watched in the fall, and I really liked him as a sleeper prospect, 6'2", 181. So the Buffalo drafts the face of the Flint Firebirds to wrap up the first round here. And while there are some grammar errors, I can go back and fix those later. But overall, very good mock draft by Draft Utopia. We did have the most accurate NHL mock last year, so we're trying to repeat, and we'll have full NHL draft coverage Friday. I'll be working on the NHL draft results page immediately following the podcast today. We've also got our top 50 big board set up, so if you check out the NHL draft game, you can go through my entire top 50. I did that before calling into the podcast today, so that's why I was late. But